All right, let's jump into this deep dive. We're looking at Chapter 3, From Behavior Analysis for Lasting Change. Right?
Yeah.
You mentioned that you really like how this chapter emphasizes prepping for behavior change, sort of setting the stage.
Exactly, yeah. It's like, getting the garden ready before you plant anything. You got to make sure the soil is right. So this chapter really stresses that before you even think about specific strategies, you really need to analyze the situation and set up the right conditions.
I like that, like creating the perfect environment for things to grow, right?
Absolutely.
And the chapter starts off by saying, first and foremost, we have to understand our client.
Yeah, you need to know, well, their history, their background, their cultural background, even, their personality.
Yeah.
And the environment, the setting where the behavior is actually happening.
So, like, you wouldn't use the same approach with a teenager in a classroom that you would, like, a toddler at home.
Exactly. It's so individual. Every person is unique, and so is every situation.
Yeah, which reminds me of this study that the chapter mentions. It talks about how cultural factors influenced how involved parents were in group sessions.
Oh, yeah, that's a great example.
Which I thought was really interesting. That's something that, we might not think about actually impacts, how we approach treatment.
It shows how important it is to really consider every aspect.
Yeah, and one of the things that the chapter talks about is this idea of a systems-level approach.
Yeah.
What exactly does that mean?
Well, it's about looking beyond just the behavior itself and understanding the whole system that surrounds it, like all the factors at play.
So, like, it's not just looking at, like, the individual, but it's looking at everything around them as well.
Exactly. It's like, imagine a company that's having trouble with employees constantly being late. Instead of just, punishing individuals, they step back and look at the bigger picture. They observe what's going on, talk to employees and managers, and discover, oh, wait a minute, the problem isn't that people are lazy, it's that there is a lack of clear communication from management about expectations.
So it's like playing detective to uncover those hidden factors.
Exactly.
Right there.
And once you understand those, then you can actually build a really solid foundation for change.
Okay, and so the chapter then goes on to talk about, once you've done that initial analysis, then it's about involving key players, like building a team.
Right. Absolutely. Bringing in everyone who's important to the client, family members, teachers, therapists, even people in the community. It's about creating that network of support and making sure everyone's on the same page, working toward the same goals.
Yeah, it's like, if we're going back to that garden analogy, it's like making sure you have, the right nutrients, the right sunlight for that plant to really thrive. But it's not just about the people, right? It also mentions assessing resources.
Oh, that's a crucial part. It's about figuring out what resources are already available, whether that's within the family, the school, the community, and how those resources can be used to support the behavior change plan.
So you're really setting the stage, right? You're understanding the client, you're analyzing the whole system, you're gathering your team, and you're taking stock of all the resources you have. That's quite a checklist.
It is. But once you have that groundwork laid, you're in a much stronger position to choose effective interventions.
Right. And that's really where the magic happens. And speaking of interventions, the chapter really stresses the importance of collaboration when it comes to selecting those interventions.
Absolutely. It's not about dictating solutions. It's about working together with the client and their support team to choose interventions that are a good fit for their specific needs and their values.
So what would that look like, say, in a real-life situation?
Okay, so imagine a parent who wants their child to try new foods. Great. Instead of forcing the child, the team might work together to create a plan that involves gradually introducing new foods in a familiar setting, like at home during dinner.
Okay.
And then they use positive reinforcement to encourage the child to try those new foods.
Yeah, so it's about meeting the child where they are and finding solutions that everyone feels good about.
Exactly. And when everyone feels heard and respected, they're much more likely to be on board with the plan and work together.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
But even with the best laid plans, things don't always go smoothly, right? I mean, we encounter challenges along the way.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Things come up.
And the chapter acknowledges that, ABA professionals need to be prepared to troubleshoot, to adjust the plan as needed.
Yeah. So it's important to be flexible and, ready to adapt.
What's an example of a challenge that you might see, pop up when you're trying to create this supportive environment, and how would you address it?
Well, one common challenge is resistance from a family member or caregiver. Maybe they don't fully understand ABA, or they have concerns about certain interventions.
Right.
In those cases, it's really important to listen to their concerns, to educate them about ABA, and to work collaboratively to find solutions that address their worries.
So it's about building trust and rapport so everyone feels comfortable.
Precisely. And when you have that strong foundation of trust and communication, you're much more likely to overcome any challenges that come up.
Okay, this has been so insightful already, and we've only just scratched the surface of Chapter 3. Before we move on, though, I want to touch on something the chapter calls treatment integrity. What exactly does that mean?
Yes, treatment integrity. That's a good one. It basically means ensuring that the intervention is being implemented correctly and consistently, like as it was designed. You wouldn't bake a cake and just skip adding the flour, right? Every ingredient in the plan is there for a reason.
So how do we actually make sure that the plan is being carried out correctly?
Well, the chapter mentions a few strategies, like providing thorough training for everyone who's involved in implementing the interventions, creating clear instructions, checklists, and even just regularly observing and providing feedback.
Okay, so it's about making sure that everyone is equipped and supported to carry out the plan.
Absolutely. And when you have strong treatment integrity, you increase the chances of seeing those positive outcomes for the client.
Makes sense.
Okay, so we've been talking about like laying the groundwork, right? Understanding the client, analyzing the system, getting the team together, looking at our resources. Now let's talk about the contingency manager.
Okay, remind me, who is that again? I feel like it's a pretty important role.
Yeah, definitely important. They're like the captain of the ship. They're the one overseeing the whole plan, making sure everyone's on track, everyone's doing what they need to be doing. It could be, a parent, a teacher, a therapist, anyone kind of leading the charge.
So they're making sure the plan's actually being put into action.
Exactly. But like any good captain, they need a good crew, right? So the contingency manager needs support to be successful.
Okay, so how do we support the contingency manager?
Well, the chapter talks about giving them clear instructions, like making sure they really understand the plan, consistent training, making sure they have the skills they need, and regular feedback so they know how they're doing and they can make adjustments if they need to.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we're giving them the tools and the support to really lead effectively.
Right. And it's especially important, if they're dealing with really challenging behaviors. It can be tough.
For sure. The chapter also talks about reinforcing the contingency manager themselves, right?
Yeah, you got to make them feel appreciated and supported too, like they're doing a big job.
Makes sense. If we want them to support the client, we got to support them. So it's like this chain reaction of positivity.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got the contingency manager steering the ship. What else does the chapter say is important when we're trying to create this supportive environment?
One thing that really stood out to me is this idea of contextual fit.
Contextual fit.
Yeah, basically making sure that the interventions we choose are a good fit, like for the specific situation.
Okay.
And the individual's needs. Like what works in one setting might not work in another, right?
So give me an example. What does that look like in real life?
Okay, so let's say you're working with a kid who has trouble focusing during circle time at school.
Okay.
A strategy that might work great one-on-one, in a quiet therapy room, might not be so effective in a busy classroom with lots of distractions.
Right.
So it's about choosing interventions that make sense in the real world, in the environments where the behavior is actually happening.
Yeah, like meeting the client where they are.
Exactly. You got to think about their strengths, their challenges, and then tailor the interventions to fit their unique needs.
I really like how this chapter is all about individualization. It's not one size fits all. It's about finding what works best for that specific person.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes for communication, too, like how we talk to clients and their families.
Oh, right. The chapter does talk about the importance of clear communication.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah.
Using language that everyone understands, avoiding jargon, being sensitive to cultural differences.
So everyone's on the same page no matter what their background is.
Exactly. The goal is to have this really supportive, collaborative environment where everyone feels comfortable, asking questions, sharing their thoughts.
That makes sense because if someone doesn't understand the plan, they're not going to be able to help put it into action.
Exactly. And that goes back to treatment integrity, right? Clear communication is key.
For sure. Okay, so we've got contextual fit, clear communication. What else?
Well, this might seem obvious, but the chapter really stresses using interventions that are evidence-based.
Yeah, of course. We want to use things that have been proven to work. But with so many approaches out there, How do you know which ones are backed up by research?
That's where, professional training comes in, staying up to date on the latest research, reading articles, going to conferences. You always got to be learning and growing.
Right, like a lifelong student of ABA.
Exactly, because things are always changing, and you got to stay on top of it.
I like that. Okay, so we've got evidence-based interventions. What's next?
Data collection.
Ah, yes, data. Gotta love data. It's the heart of ABA.
It really is. It lets us track progress, see what's working, what's not. It's like having this roadmap.
So without data, we're just guessing.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Data gives us that objective evidence so we can make those informed decisions.
And make sure we're actually making a difference.
Exactly. And speaking of making a difference, the chapter also says we got to celebrate those successes along the way.
Oh, yeah, that's important. It's easy to get bogged down on the challenges, but it's good to acknowledge all the progress, big and small.
Absolutely. It keeps everyone motivated and feeling good about the work they're doing.
It creates a more positive environment.
For sure. And that's crucial for lasting change.
All right, so we've covered so much already in this chapter.
Yeah, we have.
From understanding the client and their world to, picking interventions that are actually going to work and making sure the plan is being implemented well. But there's one more big piece I wanted to touch on.
Okay.
And that's generalization and maintenance.
Oh, yeah. Those
Yeah.
are two biggies, for sure.
Super important, right?
Yeah.
It's great if we see changes happening during the intervention, but we want those changes to stick.
Exactly.
So how do we make that happen? How do we make sure that what we're working on actually carries over into the client's everyday life?
Well, I think it's helpful to think about each of those terms separately for a minute.
Okay.
So generalization, that's about making sure the changes we're seeing aren't just happening in one specific setting or with one specific person.
Okay.
Like, we want the client to be able to use those skills in different environments and with different people.
So, for example, if a kid learns to, raise their hand before speaking up in class, we want to see them using that same skill at home, at the park, with their family, with their friends.
Exactly. We want those skills to be flexible, to be useful in lots of different situations.
Right. And then maintenance, that's about making those changes last.
Right.
Like even after the formal intervention is ended.
Yeah, exactly. We don't want the progress to disappear as soon as we're not there providing support anymore.
Right.
It's like teaching someone to ride a bike.
Okay.
You start with training wheels, you provide lots of support, but the goal is for them to be able to ride independently.
So how do we actually achieve that? What can we do to support both generalization and maintenance?
Well, the chapter talks about a few different strategies. One is gradually fading prompts and reinforcement.
Okay.
So at first, we might give lots of reminders and rewards.
Okay.
But as the client gets better at the skill, we slowly reduce those supports.
Like taking off those training wheels bit by bit.
Exactly. Another really important strategy is involving natural supports.
Okay.
So that means working with the people who are already in the client's life, like family members, teachers, coaches, whoever it might be, helping them understand the behavior plan and how they can support those changes.
So it's about creating this consistent and supportive environment.
Yeah, that's the key. Consistency. And the chapter also emphasizes teaching self-monitoring skills. So the client can, track their own progress, learn to manage their own behavior even when we're not there.
Wow. So it's really about empowering them to take charge.
Exactly.
And that's when you've truly created a supportive environment for lasting change.
Right. It's not just about changing the behavior in the moment. It's about setting them up for success in the long run.
That's really what it's all about. Well, this has been such a great deep dive into Chapter 3. I feel like we could talk about this stuff all day.
Me too. There's so much to learn here.
It really is a comprehensive chapter, packed with practical tips and insights that ABA practitioners can actually use.
It is. It really emphasizes taking that holistic approach, considering the whole person, their whole world.
Right. It's not just about the behavior itself. It's about understanding the environment, the support system, the skills they need to thrive.
Absolutely. It's about creating that foundation for positive change.
Well said. So for all our listeners out there, keep those wheels turning. Think about how you can apply these concepts, not just in your work, but in your personal life too. How can you adjust the environment to create those positive, lasting changes?
And remember, it's not always about changing the person. Sometimes it's about changing the things around them.
Until next time, keep learning and keep growing.